Hello, my teen talkers. This is Jackie. I am a CPRS, a PRSC from Tennessee. I'll be here talking about recovery from trauma tonight. So hopefully I can answer some of your guys' questions, maybe help you guys with how to deal with trauma in your life. If you have any questions, just pop them up. I can see them here in the comment section, and I got people helping me. So first I want to start off with what is a trauma, right? Because a lot of people have issues with, well, my doctor says I have PTSD, but I don't think it was a big enough trauma. And to me, it doesn't matter what the traumatic event was, but if you perceive it as traumatic, it is a traumatic event, and it can lead to PTSD. So I like to go over what a big T and a little t is as far as trauma, because I do a little bit of trauma-based work. I don't specialize in it because it's just a little hard for me to do, but it is something that, especially us indigenous people, we see every day. Our young teenagers are always, seems to be more at high risk for trauma. And how do we deal with that as a people? So, you guys are our next generation, so we need to be giving you guys the coping skills to handle trauma, because, that's the only way we're going to get through this, right? Because we also have ancestral trauma. Anybody else heard of that terminology before? I really didn't start hearing it until I was in my 20s and 30s, so this is kind of something cool that you guys are learning, right? So we still carry some of the ancestral trauma of, so I'm Cherokee. Our people went on the Trail of Tears, so we have that. The Pine Hill, you guys got moved off your original land, so you have that trauma still going with you. So what I want us to focus on is not particularly the details. Oh, hey, Jeff. Do you want to come on live, or do you want to just answer the questions? Okay. I think there's like a gap in between. But getting back to ancestral trauma, right, and the work we're going to be doing is we need to learn how to recover from it. And the best way I know how, and what I teach my clients, is CBT, DBT, right? So CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's really great. You can go to a group therapy session, and they'll teach you how to use cognitive behavioral therapies to start changing things. There's also DBT, which I love. It changed my life for the better. It is dialectic behavioral therapy. Now, those are some really big words I'm throwing at you guys, right? All that really means is that two opposing ideas can be true at the same time. So, okay, I might be very intelligent, but I don't know about everything, right? I might be stupid in how to work Facebook Live. So two opposing things, like I'm stupid and I'm smart, it can be true at the same time. And that's what dialectical behavioral therapy will help with if you have a huge trauma in your life, right? So we're looking at how to do a better coping mechanism than the coping mechanisms we've been taught generationally. And some of those are, we need to look at ourselves, like, well, how do we handle trauma? Do we just bury our head in the sand and not think it's happening? Do we cry, scream, kick, get angry? So we need to figure out what our coping mechanisms are, so we can figure out how to best work with those. So let me know in your comment section what you think your coping mechanism is, and then we'll work with that. I'm going to just do some general knowledge on mindfulness. It's a term that's used a lot today, especially in this climate and environment. Mindfulness in DBT and the work that I do is more about breathing exercises and being aware and being in the moment. And a lot of people contribute to like meditation. I'm not going to teach you how to meditate today. I can teach you how to meditate if you want to learn. I think Brenda will be better at it than I will, but that's a good way to be mindful. But mindfulness is a whole lot more than just meditation. So we need to be aware, and that's what we'll get back to the big T's and the little T's in trauma, right? Is that if we can understand the origin of our trauma, then we can best learn how to use the skills and the coping skills to defeat it, right? And trauma is never going to go away, but we can work at it and make it better. So what can we do? One of my favorite skills, and it's very easy, that I teach all the time, is called stop. I know that sounds really stupid, right? Stop. But it's very simple. And I'm just getting some paper to show you how to do the skill, right? So let's stop. I'm not really good at writing upside down, but stop. So the S is for stop. T is take a breath, take a step back. O, observe. And then P is for proceed, right? Well, how do we do that? So let's say you're in a fight with your mom, okay? And you keep getting angry, or she's not listening because she doesn't understand, because there's generational gap, right? So instead of keep yelling and probably getting your phone taken away and you're, whatever, can't go to the ball game this Friday, take a step back. Think about what you're saying. Think about what your mom's saying, right? And observe the situation. Is this beneficial? Is this argument really worth it? Or is it worth it? And if it is, how can I continue in a mindful manner without being disrespectful to my mom or disrespectful to myself, right? So those are the things that stop can help you with. And I know it sounds stupid and easy, but stop is not just when you get the P, you're done. Sometimes you have to keep going over and over again, right? I know I have to do it. I have a teenager and 2 preteens, and I love them. But you guys think you know everything, and you're just mean. So I had to stop quite a bit with them because I had to remember I'm the adult, right? Am I the adult? When did that happen? But it's fun being this age and trying to tell you guys what to do, right? That's why I specialized in it. But stop is really easy, and if you guys can just take a notebook or like one of those things called the sticky notes. Take a sticky note, write stop on it, right? Put it somewhere you can put it. Are you guys starting to drive now? Put it in your car so you don't get road rage, right? Put it on your mirror at home so that when you do get in a fight with your mom or your dad or your little brother or your big sister, you stop, right? That's a really good way to help with being mindful in situations. And it's a good way to recover too. Because if you can start making the small steps to recover how you talk to your family members, we can start recovering from trauma. And I think you guys have been talking about friends that have suffered from traumatic events and things that are going on up there. So I want to hear about it. Like, what is hurting you the most about this? Like, what can we do to help, right? Sorry, I'm getting notifications on here. It's not easy being your age. I wouldn't be your age again in a million years. I really wouldn't. But I've been there, and I know that's hard to hear too. And I'm also Indigenous. I know what the statistics are for us going through traumatic experiences, and it's not pleasant outlook. But we can change it. We can actually recover and make the next generation better. Okay? Because, you know, you're the generation that's either going to save the world or set it on fire. So which one do you want to do? Probably right now you're all thinking I want to set it on fire. But let's think about how we can save it. And first and foremost, we need to start with you guys. Because if you can't cope with the things that are going on with you guys daily, how can we expect for you guys to grow up healthy? So let's recover. And what does that look like? So number one, getting help, using the communications tools that I'm going to show you guys. Talk to Jeff. He runs this Teen Talk. All right, it's live, right? All your questions are between us. No adults are going to see it unless certain reasons, but other than that, it's very confidential. We want to be here to help you guys. You know, tell us what's going on. That's how we get help. That's how we make things better. So what are your ideas on recovery? I know what recovery looks like for addiction, mental health, right, and trauma. What are your ideas of what it looks like? So the best thing to do is do a recovery map. Okay? I usually tell people to get a poster board or a butcher paper. I don't know if they still have magazines or not. Get online, print out some pictures of things that you want in your life. And that's a recovery poster. And you put it up on your wall and you remember, this is who I want to be and this is who I'm going to be. Not who I am today, because we're all growing, right? I'm not the same person I was 5 minutes ago or 10 years ago. So that's easy. Any questions, Jeff? Are you still with me? I don't know how to make this. I guess I hit the plus sign. I don't know. But, so, recovery. We got stop. We got the recovery map. And it's just 7:12. I'm already telling you all the good stuff. So, trying to get this fixed, right? So we got DB2, right? Which was what? Two opposing ideas can be true at the same time. So one of the biggest things that I see is our inner critic. And I'm going to teach you guys real quick a skill that I use constantly. And it is called reframing. Okay? This is a good one. Okay? Especially for people with the self-esteem issues, because victim blaming. That's the number one reason we lose so many people, is because of victim blaming, because they blame themselves, one, or two, society blames them for the traumatic experience that they went through. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to reframe that inner critic so that you can be stronger with it, right? So let's say your inner critic says, I'm not good enough. Okay, that's your inner critic. Okay, so I'm not good enough. I think this is coming up backwards, isn't it? But this is what your inner critic is saying. So we're going to try to reframe that. And reframe is just flip it. Let's just flip it. Make it easier. All right? So what we want to do is make it from destructive, like it's tearing us apart, to something that can make us better. So if I'm not good enough, what am I not good enough in? I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not great at cooking. Okay? So I'm going to learn more cooking styles, right? Or pay attention to my nanny more. So, and that would be more of a constructive criticism, okay? Why do you think I'm focusing on this? Is because our inner critic is the thing that we have to hear all the time, right? When we go to bed at night, what is the last voice we hear? Our own. We tell each other, we tell ourselves in our mind how horrible we are. And we're the only ones that know every little horrible thing we've ever done, right? So our inner critic is either going to help us or hurt us. And that's why we really need to learn how to reframe and recover from victim shaming. So one of the things that I hear a lot is, well, if I hadn't have worn that, or if I hadn't have been there. Okay, you got to stop. That's not healthy. That's deconstructive, right? Instead of saying that, what can I do to warn other people? Or what can I have done differently? And most of the time, there's absolutely nothing you could have done differently. Okay? Because what happens sometimes is not your fault. It's never your fault. But if we can reconstruct it and make it more positive to help other people, then we can be more recovered. Because that's the game of survival, is having to be recovered. And that is a long, hard journey. I know people who have been in recovery for 10 years and still fight every day to make sure that it's a good day. It's a hard road to go, but I mean, if anybody can do it, it's your generation, because you're young enough to do it and strong enough, because, well, we're putting you guys through crap. You guys already went through a pandemic already, right? And how hard was that to go through? Having to wear masks, had to do school from home. I bet you that was fun, though. I would have loved to know that when I was a kid. Jeff, you got anything that you want to add? Because I don't know how to add anybody to the screen with this one. And my teenager is outside playing because she's smart. She likes to be outside, and that's great for me. I love that she's outside. I told her she needed to be here, but she wanted to be outside, so. Okay, did you want to get, it's backwards. Not that you can think of right now. I know, I feel kind of lost without my co-pilot. I usually have Cheyenne in here making comments, and so it's just a little lost for words. Is she still out there playing? So, but it says I have 2 viewers. Who's my other one that's on right now? Brenda, is that you? No, okay. So, I guess we can talk about trauma, but it's the big T and the little t. That's a little bit over my head sometimes. But so basically, in the shrink world, as I call it, we call traumas either a big trauma with a big T, a capital T, or a small trauma with a little t. Okay. And so, but that doesn't take away the what happened to you, right? So the traumatic experience of it doesn't take that away. It just has how we categorize them. And what really surprised me is that, so I have, I used to have PTSD from a car accident. And I argued with my doctor for a good month before I actually gave in and said, okay, maybe I do have a little bit of PTSD from a car accident, right? And because I thought I knew everything, right? Because this is what I do for a living. And I'm like, no. A car accident is not a traumatic experience, and that is not a good diagnosis for me. That is not a good enough experience. You're just going to have to diagnose me with something else because I'm just having anxiety. That's it. So I actually had a pretty smart doctor at the time, and he pulled out the DSM-4 and told me to read all the criterias for PTSD, and then looked at me and said, okay, you done diagnosing yourself and letting me help you now? So when you kind of take a back seat. But now, today, that was probably 2016. So that's been like 5 years, 6, 7. So now we diagnose it as a big trauma or a little trauma. So like a car accident would be a little T, right? So I would be okay with someone telling me that I could get PTSD from a car accident. But it doesn't take away from the experience. You can still get PTSD from a car accident, right? Or you can still get PTSD from watching someone get in a car accident, or watching a loved one die, or being in a house fire. And then we have the big ones, which are rape, murder, all kinds of things. And those are the big T's, right? So we're going to focus a different kind of trauma style on those than we would with a little T. A little T PTSD, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT, talk about it, go to therapy. Big T's, you're going to get a little bit more intimate with your therapist and talk about it, right? But that's a good thing. It's just to let them know the level of the trauma, and it's not, and it takes away the experience of your traumatic experience. It's just how people diagnose now. I never judge when someone tells me they have PTSD, because anything can be traumatic to somebody else, right? So the death of a loved one, that can be very traumatic to people, especially if you've never been through the death process. Okay, there's Michelle. Right, and that's very traumatic. And other therapists or CPRSs will look at you and go, that's not a very traumatic experience. That just requires a little bit of grief counseling, then you're fine. But that's not true when it comes to other people. That can be like one of the most hardest experience somebody goes through, especially if they've never went through it before or never learned about it growing up. So that's why we have the big T's and the little T's. And I'm telling you guys all this is so that you know where to start out in recovery, right? Because, my patients know this, my clients know this, is one of my number one things I tell people is, if you know the origin, the root cause of what's going on, we can fix it, right? It might take years, it might take a few months, it might take a little bit of the M&Ms of life, meditation, but it's going to get fixed, right? It's going to be okay eventually. Might not be today, might not be tomorrow, but it'll get there. So that's why I like to start with the stop. Okay, does everybody remember what stop is? Stop, take a step back, observe, proceed. Okay? Don't forget to put that on a sticky note. Put it in your car, put it on your mirror, so that when you're arguing with your mama, you can stop, realize what's going on, maybe back up, realize maybe it's not an argument that's worth having. I know I have to do that a lot, especially in power struggles. You don't really want to get in power struggle with anybody. That's not going to bring nothing, right? And then also, but is it worth an argument having, right? Like, you're hurt, you need to talk to somebody. That is a good one to have. So you can stop and you can observe and maybe you're not using the right language, or you're not saying the right things to make them understand how you're feeling, so you can actually observe and then proceed. And that will help with the recovery process, okay? And then I want you to really focus on the inner critic, right? What are you telling yourself, okay? How are you hindering your own recovery? What is it that your brain's telling you that you can't get past? And let's reframe it. Let's break it down and make it better, okay? I have to fight that one every day. I know that I do a lot of schema work. A schema is just basically a character defect way of doing therapy. It is actually pretty cool. So there are 18 of them. It's abandonment, defectiveness, social isolation, mistrust, abuse, and it is a good way to do group therapy or therapy with someone who doesn't take to the traditional therapy routes, right? So I do that quite a bit, and one of my favorite ones to work with is abandonment and defectiveness, because those are the two I can understand the most, right? So, and in those and working with schemas, you have to know the origin of those, because if you don't, you can't, excuse me, get to the root cause. Allergy season. Now I'm starting to get allergies. You can't get to the root cause of that origin, right? Like defectiveness. So, defectiveness, big word, right? It basically means that you think that you are different from anybody else in the room, or you're not good enough. No one will ever love you for who you really are. Things of that nature. Now, abandonment can be all kinds of things. So, one of your parents left you as a child, divorce, parent died, grandparent died, something that happens real young, okay? Because it starts out in your childhood. So, to do that work, you really need to know what your origin is of that schema. And the reason I bring up abandonment and defectiveness is because those are the two that Native children have the most of, especially defectiveness, right? Because we've pretty much been told all of our lives we're different from everybody else. Whether that's true or not, it starts sinking in. And sometimes it sinks in a bad way. Especially if you're raised in an environment where maybe there's not a lot of other Native Americans around you, right? Not a lot of indigenous. So, like for myself, I grew up here in East Tennessee. I didn't have a big indigenous population. I mean, I had my parents, my sister, my grandparents, but I really felt like a lone wolf, as you'd say. So defectiveness is a normal thing that I see in natives, and especially when it comes to traumatic events, right? Because like I told you earlier, we have a higher percentage of getting in traumatic experiences before the age of 10. How horrible is that? That's just something that's just unfathomable, is that before the age of 10, most indigenous children are more likely to be exposed to more traumatic experiences. All right? So the recovery process for our children is going to be learning the origin, right? Learning how to reframe those, and maybe doing it better for the next generation. So that's what I'm kind of hoping I'm doing here, is that getting to you guys, and if you've had a traumatic event, you can learn and move on and maybe teach other people and become another warrior that helps another young kid go through whatever you're going through, right? Because that's really basically what recovery is recovering loudly, so people don't have to suffer in the silence. That's one of my favorite quotes for what I do for a living, is we recover loudly so other people don't suffer in silence. And that's what recovery is about for me, is being very vocal about what I need, right? How do we do that? Well, first of all, we got to learn what we need and how to communicate that well. Stop is a good place to start. But sometimes sometimes I even get caught up in my words, especially when it's very emotional. We tend to get tongue-tied or angry and act out. So, well, what you want to really remember is anger is a secondary emotion, right? What does that mean, Jackie? Okay, so anger is usually masking another emotion that you have. Sadness, disappointment, right? Those are the things that you're masking with anger. Mine is anxiety. I have a lot of anxiety and I get angry, right? So that's how I show my anxiety, is by getting angry. And so if I know I'm starting to get upset, I'm starting to get mad at people, sometimes I just get hangry and I need to eat. But I need to step back and look at my anxiety level. Where am I at? What am I doing? Right? Michelle, I'm going to try to bring you on camera, so bear with me. That's one of the best advices I can give you about recovery is you've got to, number one, learn the order. Hey, lady.
Hey.
Hey.
So I've been listening, and I had wrote in the comments that I know recognizing triggers is important, but what are some of the ways to work through PTSD re-events? And the reason I asked that was because I know you and I had talked about that I was in counseling because of the house fire, and
Right.
you had mentioned rethinking, I think it was.
Yes.
How to retrain how you think about it, I think is what you told me.
Yes.
And I wanted to find out, could you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I was going into that. I don't know if you were on earlier, but we're calling it the inner critic, and I think this is backwards, so this isn't helpful. But it's so you reframe your inner thoughts. Okay, so like let's take it back to that night, right? So what if I could have done something differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are common thoughts that people have when they're in a traumatic event. What could I have done differently? Absolutely nothing. You could have done nothing differently. It would have happened in the first place. That's the number one thing I want to say. Okay? But you have to reframe that in your own brain, right? So I used to having a desk to write on, so just bear with me. So now that we know that your inner critic is going to say, what could I have done differently? Start making a list. Start making a list. And for everything that you write down, I want you to remember it still would have happened. There's nothing you could have done, right? But you can also reframe it in, what can I do to better prepare someone else for what I do? Because I think you heard the quote earlier, if I recover loudly, people don't have to suffer in silence. And that's basically the best advice I can give for anybody who's in recovery is don't stay silent in your suffering, because if you do, we're not being able to do those building blocks to help the next person, right? Because you're a uniquely individual people, and what worked for you is not going to work for me or work for Cheyenne or Georgella. It's going to be uniquely, yeah, if you're going to make noise in the background, I'm going to use you. It's going to be you. And that's why we got to recover loudly, so that we can help understand how everybody works. And it's especially in what I do for a living, um, it's hard. It hurts my heart because Native American Indigenous children are 10 times more likely to go through a traumatic experience before the age of 10, right? How do we fix
Right.
How do we fix that?
Right.
I guess we'll now.
because I don't have any other ideas. Because my inner critic is telling me I'm not good enough to even think about the solutions to even fix it. So now I have to reframe that and starting making ideas of what can fix that. Teen talk, passing on
Hmm.
our love languages, our plant histories, right? That we have on Friday. Did a little plug.
Right.
Uh, but that's why it's so important to reframe that inner critic, because that's what's going to be hurting you the most. Is when you lay down at night, you're not thinking, nobody else is telling you anything else. It's your own brain, and that's what that inner critic is. So we got to reframe that inner critic. That is I really harp on that, especially, and it's a CBT skill that I teach. Um, a lot of people, they pay a lot of money for it, so you all getting something really good for free. Uh, but it's CBT, and it's the inner critic. You got to reframe that. It, it sounds so simple, but yeah, it is one of the hardest things I see people struggling with. So, like, you couldn't have done anything different. Not a
And I know,
hard thing. No, you couldn't have.
and I think that resounding in a lot of different ways and fits a lot of different situations. And I know as we were talking about the Teen Talk topic
hmm
for the last 2 weeks has been about assault.
Yeah,
And I don't remember if I got to tell you about what's going on here locally regarding what's being alleged a serial rapist and
right,
3 young women in 3 different counties in this area. Um, one of the young ladies' families, her sisters, um, she has died, is what I'm understanding, a few months ago. Her sisters are circling a petition to um, reopen her case because it was dropped.
right,
Is what I'm just off of memory. I think the case was dropped because um, she's not physically present to be involved in the prosecution. The sisters are petitioning to use the evidence that they have and sworn statements that they have to pursue it. And this is something I bring this up because initially I didn't want Pine Hill or Teen Talk to even get involved in that situation, but now it's hit national news. And I watched a video of the family of that one young lady, and one of the other victims spoke out. And so that really falls in line with what you're saying, is to say something to bring attention to the issue. That was
right,
this is a rape issue, physical assault, um, and in the aftermath of it, unfortunately, there's a second trauma. There's a trauma followed by another trauma for uh, I think all of the victims involved, because the one victim's family is um, dealing with the loss of their daughter. Um, my understanding and what I've read is that there was a lot of bullying and things like that after the rape, and led to all of that. Um, and I just see a lot of brokenness and trying to get the judicial system to work in the way that we think it should work. But
right,
the reason that I had suggested making this about recovery is because I see a lot, especially in that situation and in my own personal experiences, that there's the event, and then there's what you think is supposed to happen because society says that these are the things you're supposed to do.
hmm
Um, it's out of your hands in a way. Um, we even uh, one teen talk session went on long after our live video was over about why women or even men don't report assaults. Is because it's it's too much of a hassle. It's like victimizing the victim all over again.
Right. And
Um,
so one of the things that I teach is it's called the 7 forms of self-esteem, right? Like, how do we get our self-esteem? Where do we get it? And the one of them is actually um, from trauma, right? And the number one reason of very low self-esteem or suicidal ideations is because victims tend to be re-victimized either by the process of trying to get their perpetrators arrested and justice, or they get bullied by society by, well, if you weren't wearing that or if you weren't there at that time, right? So we have this horrible circle that we're doing with victims that and I've told you this privately. I think we need to, we really need to stop and take a step back and see what we're actually doing to these young children. But the things are getting better. And since we're doing this right here on how to recover, I think we're moving in the right direction. It's just going to take a while. I always have hope.
I agree. I think it is, you said that, and I brought up the house fire on purpose because it wasn't, there was not a thing that happened that, the house fire was just a random, it just happened.
It's random.
And it's not because I had on, pajamas or, or whatever. It was an event that was destined, I guess you could say. I don't know. No matter what, that day would have been that way anyway.
Right.
Now,
And
incidentally for me, the events of that few minutes of trying to get out of the house, which is why I brought up the PTSD re-events. There were moments in that few minutes when I was on the phone with dispatch and I was on the trying to get the door open, and where that same feeling of I'm in this little tight corner and I can't get out. That same feeling in being assaulted, that same feeling in being bullied, that it's the same feeling
it is.
of helplessness, I guess is the right word.
So earlier we went through how the system is calling big T's and little T's. Did you catch that? I tried to explain what trauma was just in case.
I caught the tail end of it.
So in your case, they probably put you in like a little T, right? A little trauma. But that's a huge trauma to you. So it doesn't take any way of the traumatic experience that you experience, right? So they put you in this box, right, of when you should be healed, right? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was funny.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that's not true. That's why we got to recover it loudly so that we can say, listen, this box that you feel like you're in, this is how I got out of that box, right? And that doesn't mean that you're going to run around telling everybody and their mama, this is how I did it. But you see your other kids struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I consider all my indigenous kids, I see one acting up, I'm going to jerk it up by its hair too. Be like, we're Cherokee, we don't do that. But we got to be good leaders for them. And I think starting with this being teenagers is like the hardest thing in the world. And then you put a traumatic event on top of it. There's no way in the world without with them being normal by the time they're adults, even though there's no normal, right?
Yeah, and that traumatic event can be anything. Like you were saying, the traumatic event can be anything. You mentioned divorce and things like that in the past in Teen Talk. That has been, my dad lives 30 minutes away and he won't pick me up. So you brought up abandonment, and it made me think, well, that's, in that situation, it was traumatic abandonment.
It is.
And so, you know, trying to retrain the brain to think, instead of I'm being abandoned, it's more like, well, he's missing out because I'm like the coolest kid around, you know.
It is. And
And
so
that's hard to do
it
because it
is.
messes with your head.
Yeah, because I was one of those kids. I was one of those kids like, "So why does my daddy want me? Why did he leave? I was a daddy's girl until I was like 11, 12, and then he was gone, just gone. So, um, but there was one piece of advice, and I actually didn't learn this till I was like in my 30s, and I'm not going to tell you how old I was when I learned it in my 30s, but and it's something that sticks with me all the time is not everything's about you. Not everything is about you. And when it finally clicked, it clicked, and it was like, oh my God, I'm not the center of the world, and he didn't abandon me because of me. He abandoned me because of him, right? So,
Right.
Lord, that's why we got to recover loudly. And that, I mean, I know that I'm sounding like a broken record, but that's basically what I do in my job field is sound like a broken record because when you start reframing your inner critic, like I'm not good enough, or what could I have changed, or what could I have done better, when you start reframing that, that's when the healing process is going to start, right? And then when you get to not everything's about me, if it's abandonment, or if you feel defective as an Indigenous child that didn't grow up on the res, right? I grew up down here in East Tennessee. There's not a big, huge population, right? So I felt defective as crap. Like I felt like a one in a million, um, and that's heartening. Wasn't always this very put together, very confident. I know who I am. A very traditional Cherokee, and if you don't like it, you can just see the door. I wasn't always that person, and so that's why I always tell my kids, this took time. Okay, you're not going to be me tomorrow. Okay, because I'm not going to be me tomorrow. I'm going to be a better
Mm-hmm.
version of me tomorrow. And hopefully, I'm going to be one of them very old grandmothers that sits under the tree. And that's my joy. I want to be a clan mother, maybe a beloved woman, probably not. But I want to sit under a tree. I want really long gray hair. And when people come to me I go, baby, no, just sit down. Let me tell you how to do this. That's my goal. I don't know if I'll live that long, but I'm starting to get the gray hair already. So, but yeah, recover loudly. Um, that's hard for kids. I know it is because uh, I'm pretty sure one of the reasons that one of my kids skipped out is because she was afraid to talk about trauma. Because unfortunately, she's one of the statistics, and half of my family is. So that's hard, and I have to talk about that day in and day out at work,
Yeah.
especially a sexual assault. American women, they really don't understand that it's, I used to use the example of, so on my mom's side, with 4 grandchildren or 4 granddaughters, right?
Mm-hmm.
1 out of 4 made it to 18 without being sexually assaulted. One.
Wow. That's not surprising.
Yeah.
And of course, Teen Talk, even though we have the Indigenous base, it's open to everybody.
Yeah.
And uh, we've seen, at the very inception of Teen Talk, we saw um, abandonment was a big thing. And surprisingly, adults got involved in Teen Talk, and they talked about childhood traumas that they're still dealing with later in life. And I know, the house fire kind of made things resurface. that I really hadn't thought
Right.
anything about in a long time, and kind of uncovered a bunch of stuff that I really did think, I made the
Yeah.
comment to a friend of mine, why does something wait 40 years to all of a sudden be a problem? You know? So, yeah, it
Well,
really did
it's
kind
kind of
of
hard.
make a lot of things come back to the top. Yeah. So,
Wait till you feel
yeah, and as far as the
comfortable.
whole speaking out and being loud, yeah, the
Yeah, you
speaking
got to
out, being
recover
loud,
loudly.
that's, um, yeah, and I hope that as far as uh, that one family and uh, the victims involved in that rape case, um, and of course, again, I don't want Pine Hill or Teen Talk to, end up involved in it, but watching the whole thing, there's a lot of personal opinion and such, but watching the parents and the sisters and the things that they're doing, watching the one victim speak out like she did, I thought, no, see, that's power. They're taking power back. And that's
They are.
what
And
you're saying is,
recover loudly.
recover loud.
I'm,
Um,
yeah, I'm proud of that family for
and I hope as
their
far
starting
as their
conversation.
situation is concerned that, yeah, I'm sorry. I think we have a time delay, so
I think it
I'm
is too.
accidentally talking over you.
And
But
I'm accidentally
I just
talking over.
wanted to say that
We're not.
I hope that Teen Talk and Pine Hill can be supportive of what they're doing in some way, if it's nothing except that we're talking about it as a topic discussion. And with 2 weeks of talking about assault and it just kind of lingering on after the live video, um, and realizing that men and women, boys and girls are assaulted, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical assault. It can be a verbal assault or something like that. And um, just I thought it was important for us to kind of switch gears and get into, okay, once you've had an event happen, then what are the personal steps to start recovering from it? It's not because these are not things that you just get over, despite what people think. And I've noticed that, I know for myself, you internalize it because it's your event, right? And you internalize it and you try to bury it and you kind of keep it to yourself and you don't really talk. Um, but I'm seeing that these girls and this family is talking and they're coming out strong.
Right. I think so. The thing that's going on with Johnny Depp is a big mover and shaker of victims of assault, right, and verbal abuse, domestic abuse, and we had the Me Too movement going on a couple of years ago, and now we're actually talking about verbal abuse, because not, I mean, she physically assaulted him,
Yeah.
there's no doubt about that, but now we're actually talking about what verbal things can actually do to the person. And I think that's one of the big things that people don't talk about, because we have this, what is the nursery rhyme, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me.
Yeah,
And I
it
look
never
at
hurt
people
me.
and I go,
Yeah.
no,
And they do the very
yeah,
things that
no,
do.
I'm like, if you want to cut somebody to the core, you don't hurt them physically because they can heal. You hurt them verbally, right? That's just a little bit of the Cherokee coming out, but yeah, no, those words, you've got to use them correctly, because you can really seriously damage people with words. And verbal use is a silent crime in itself. It really is, Courtney. It
It
really
sure
is.
is.
It happens, and nobody talks about it, right? and I'm actually very thankful that Johnny Depp is actually doing this. What is it? He's suing her for defamation of character, and like I've seen memes and TikToks, and yeah, I love me some TikTok
Oh yeah, yeah.
About and how strong he really is. He's also in recovery. He's actually in addiction recovery. I'm sure he's still a drinker, but he's in recovery from opioids. And one of the memes was, and it was in one of my recovery networks, was that one of the questions that her lawyer asked him was if he had what he thought about using again or something like that. And he actually looked up and smiled and said, I don't ever have to do that again. And that was like that's what people need to see, because I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys, like the first year of sobriety is crap on a stick because you're paying for everything you've ever done. Right? So you got all these consequences coming and it's sick crap, okay? But it's worth getting through. And he just showed people he went through all that crap with her, right? And been verbally abused, got his finger cut off, got all this stuff. But he could still smile at the fact that he never has to use drugs again. How amazing is that, right? That's him recovering loudly
Yeah.
and also doing the lawsuit is covering and saying, men can go through this too. So, I'm very proud that we're actually making a really good turn in human history about being more kind towards each other as far as stopping the victim blaming. Like it's a conversation now. Like I know 20 years ago, it's not something you talk about. It didn't happen, you don't talk about it, right? Now we're talking about it. Like,
Yeah.
now you're seeing people going up and saying it's not what she wore, right? That caused the assault, right? It's never what you wore, right? It really isn't. They had a gallery in New York for victims, and they put up the clothing that they wore when they were assaulted, and it was just amazing. None of it was, unladylike clothing. It was nightgowns and sweatpants, and so it just proves it's not what you wear, it's not where you're at, not what you do. Right? What happened is not your fault, and stop blaming yourself. First of all, number one, and number two, let's reframe those thoughts. What can we do to talk to somebody else about making them aware? All right, what can we do? Like we're having conversations. Number one thing you can do. Courtney, verbal abuse.
It's important to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Courtney wrote, sobriety is so hard, especially not hating yourself for your mistakes. I praise Johnny Depp that he has stepped up to talk of his trauma. Too long have people been silent about their trauma, scared of the backlash. And that she's exactly right. One of the things we talked about in a past teen talk about trauma was in assault was I've brought up that working as a paralegal in a law firm, you wouldn't think it would happen in the ways that they did, but I was assaulted a number of times. The last time that that sort of thing happened, I got pushed over a desk and basically was pinned. There was nowhere to go.
right.
And there's this, and it going, like I said, standing at the front door trying to get out of a burning house, or somebody is attacking you because I'm disabled, verbally abusing me because I'm disabled, or whatever. That brief, I don't know, second where you feel like you're helpless and you can't do anything.
Yeah.
And it's not about something that you did to provoke it.
No.
It's the, the fire's not a good example, but the one incident getting pushed over a desk, um, didn't even see that coming. Had I thought that the guy was walking out the door, and I turned around, and next thing I know, I'm pushed over a desk. So exactly, Courtney. It's my husband is a police officer, and when that incident happened, I told him about it. Just me and him talking, and he said, "Why didn't you report it to the police?" And I said, "Who's going to believe me? It's my word against their word.
Mhm.
Who's going to believe me?"
Right.
It's
So,
it is a problem. Nobody will believe you. And I've actually sat and counseled with other people, and them say nobody will believe me. So, you know, it does make you kind of wonder, is that and is that a perception, or is that an actual nobody really believes you anyway,
I think it's both,
or a
to be quite honest.
combination?
It's a combination. I honestly think so, especially in small towns, right? So we also have this
Mm-hmm.
mentality here that boys will be boys. Did I ever tell you about a time that I got assaulted at work at the residential by a drunk YA? Uh, so one of my kids was coming back to redo rehab, drunk. And by the way, this the gray hair, the mama bear look. This is what I go for while I'm at work. I don't wear makeup. I want people to see me for my older wisdom, I guess. So uh, I got a call from the intake people, and they said, "Hey, you need to um, you need to come up and help him because he's mentioning you by name. You need to come up here and help him because we got to get him detox. We got to make sure that he's under the legal limit to keep." I went up there. I was up there with two nurses, um, actually the director of nursing, my partner Christopher, and one of the intake ladies. And I bent down into the car and said, "Hey, sweetie, what's going on? What can I do for you? How do what do we need?" And he just reached out and did this right here in my area. And I was like, "You've got to be kidding me." I was like, "Kid, if you weren't, if you know, if I wasn't trying to get you help, I could totally ruin your life right here, because this is not acceptable." I said, I'm gonna get you to detox. You're not gonna make any fuss. You're gonna get to detox, and then you're gonna go to counseling for appropriate behavior with women, and you will not be in my young adult group, because I couldn't work with him after that, but I didn't want to hold it against him because I'm there to help people. But where does the person who goes to help people go when they need help, right? Because I'm standing there with the director of nursing, the one of my partners, and I'm going, you're not going to do nothing. You're not going to say nothing. You're not going to do anything. So I had to be my own advocate that day and be like, this is what's going to happen. This is where you're going, and this is not for discussion. Um, and it's harder for, I guess, women to say it's not okay. It's not okay. It's not okay when you're drunk. It's not okay when you're sober. I did make him take classes. Um, so Courtney, have we helped you at all with maybe helping you with recovery? I usually like to have an active audience. So just let me know. Because I've lost Michelle. I don't know where she went. I don't know where Michelle went. Okay, there she goes. Okay, are you there?
There we are. Yeah, I don't know what happened. My video just dropped. I guess I can blame that on the internet.
That's okay.
But yeah,
But yeah, I mean, like, I didn't know where. I mean, like, honestly, I mean, if I hadn't have been, I guess, trained. I mean, where did the helpers
yeah.
go? I mean, for help.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the kid, you know, he did apologize and sober today, and he knows not to touch women ever again, unless they ask. So, I mean, small steps, but you know, and people go, well, that's the job you put yourself in. I'm like, no, I don't put myself in. Um, and in recovery to be mentally, physically, or sexually assaulted. You know, I mean, many times there's a group of people that put me on blood pressure, and that's just crazy. Uh, I mean, but they were smearing peanut butter on the cameras, setting fires in the Arby's. There shouldn't ever be an excuse. I've worked a long time on recovery, and I speak out about it now. I help others now, and it honestly helps me too. That is awesome, Courtney. You may want to look into your CPRS program in South Carolina. I know it is a good way to really start if you don't have your bachelor's or anything like that. So it's a really good way to start your career. I have
You can
mine.
definitely come and volunteer at Pine Hill and help us with this Teen Talk program
Really?
as a peer. Yeah,
We need, and
Courtney should look into, contact me, Courtney, and I'll hook you up. We'll get you into the Teen Talk as a peer counselor.
right. I mean, listen, I'm getting too old to fit in with you guys. I don't know. And here in Tennessee, that you have to be under the age of 35 to be a young adult peer counselor. And I was like, that's ageist. That's ageist. And they're like, well, you don't have to have these letters behind your name. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand that those letters mean more in my community than it does a PhD, right? I mean, because if you
Yeah.
can say I'm a peer specialist, that means I've been through it. I can talk. I've been there, done that. And I'm like, that's why so many people want those letters behind their name, is because they mean more in our community than that PhD does. And they go, yeah, you're still over 35. So we need you, Courtney. We need you.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to put on here now that I'll message Courtney afterwards and let her know, because Jackie is a peer counselor
Yeah.
in Tennessee for the Department of Mental Health. And I think you know that we have an office in North, the Pine Hill Health Network, and the in-person part of Teen Talk is done there. And Jeff actually is the program director for Teen Talk, and we thought we'd give him a break this week and move the Teen Talk live from the Teen Talk page to the Pine Hill page, and let him catch up on some other things that he needs to get done. He is watching. I see he just wrote hi. But yeah, Courtney, we would love to have you come and help us with what we're doing, because even though, and I said this earlier, even though that Health Network is Indigenous based, it's definitely not only for Indigenous people.
Right.
And going back to the events going on right now, and we just happened to start talking about assault 2 weeks ago, and so we had 2 weeks of talking about assault in Teen Talk, and I thought, we need to switch lanes and talk about the recovery from the assault, because the assault can be anything, whether physical or verbal or whatever. And, you know, I think that there's just like there's a grieving process in death, I think that same grieving process exists in an assault because you have lost something that you can't get back. Or maybe someone took something that you can't have back. And working towards recovering, because of course that touches into suicides, um, things like that. You just get pushed to the edge and pushed over. Um, but it just was ironic that this topic came up when all of this came out about this uh, 3 rapes, um, and how that whole situation just kind of went. We could have even imagined it could have gone into.
Right.
And
But
watching, I really feel for the family, um, of of all the victims. I feel for the family of all the victims because as a mother, um, with my daughter, um, and I'd imagine any parent would feel that way. Um, it's kind of the same. What could I have done differently to make sure that didn't happen to her? Kind of thing. It's that thought process, and you kind of feel like you're somehow responsible because you should have done something differently, or you should
yeah,
have, you know.
yeah, you should know different, or, you know, but it's not true. Those, that's your inner critic tripping you up again. So,
Right, right.
and you are 100% correct about the grieving process with SA, SI, um, all of it. You really do have to grieve that part of your life that is gone now. And then, but we have to do that in various stages of our lives, right? Um, one of my sisters, my oldest sister, my only sister, is turning 40 this year. And so now she's going to have to grieve her youth, right? And then when she turns 40, right? She's
Mm-hmm.
got to grieve. And grief is just a
Mm-hmm.
normal part of life. And um, we forget that. I like to tell people that grief is like a scar, okay? Either whether it's because of sexual assault, someone you've lost, um, a part of your childhood is gone, somebody abandoned you, whatever the grief process that you have to go through is, right? It is going to be a scar, okay? And I can't prop my leg up here on the table because I think that would just be weird. But I have a big, huge scar on the back of my leg, and I'm going to use it as a metaphor, okay? So that scar in time will heal, right? It won't be a gaping wound anymore. And maybe you have to go to a doctor and get it sewed up, like mine, right? I had 100 stitches, 50 on the inside, 50 on the outside, right? Sometimes you have to go to a doctor and get it sewed up. I guess that would be your counselor, your therapist, whoever you go to, right? Okay. And sometimes it'll heal on its own. You don't need stitches, but that scar will heal, right? And it will eventually stop hurting. Now, every now and again, I get a twinge of pain because something will hit it and it'll hurt, right? Because that pain will always be with you. You've just grown and grieved it. And that's what grief is. It's a scar. Think of it as a scar. You've got to go through those steps. Sometimes you got to go to the doctor, get stitches. Sometimes you can heal it on your own. But, it's going to be a scar. And you're going to have to learn about when somebody hits it and it twinges. The best advice I have, it's one of my lectures that I do for the grief processes. And when it does get hit and it hurts,
Mm-hmm.
talk about it. And if it's someone you've lost, use their name. Don't say, oh, so and so died. Say, my papa, my granny,
Mhm.
my granny, my papa Jack, right? And don't forget about the small things that they did for you, because they were human. And the biggest mistake you're going to make is trying to make them a demigod, I guess is the best way I could put it, is making them immortal and like the most perfect person you've ever met, because they weren't. They were human beings too. And that's the worst mistake people
Mhm.
make. Now, when it is a trauma such as a house fire or sexual assault and something hits it, what do you do? Right? You can't talk about that person by name, can you? You can't, right? If
Mhm.
that's what you're right for that. Sometimes if something's hitting it and it's making it twinge, most of the time it's because you're hurting for somebody else because they're going through what you're going through, right? And they're making
Mhm.
you relive a bit of that pain.
Mhm.
So that little bit of pain that you're feeling, that other person is probably feeling that gaping wound that you had, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They hear about that little twinge. So just for a moment, that gaping wound will close for a second. And that's what I
Mhm.
got for scars and grief. That's what scars are to me, is grief. I have
And
plenty of scars on my.
Courtney wrote in here, wounds heal, scars have stories, and your process is your journey. I like that. That's powerful. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
it's triggered, and you have to wade through it like you do the water you swim in. That's right. Yeah,
that is right.
you have to ride the emotions that come along. Yeah. Well, I would love to. I don't know what Jeff will say. I mean, Jeff might comment on here, but uh, I would like to invite you to come back next Thursday for Teen Talk so we can finish this whole thing up
Yeah.
on, on recovering, because it's such a broad thing, a broad topic. It's recovery of a whole bunch of different things that it would apply to. And we've gone a little bit past our 1 hour mark.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, we'd love to invite you back. Jeff said absolutely. So we've got a thumbs up from the program manager. Have you come back um, and help us explore this some more. I would
Okay.
love that.
Wonderful. And I'll be here tomorrow too, doing plants.
Plant
And it's healthy.
teaching, that's right.
It's healthy relationships. So, woo. All right. All right. I guess I got to get off preteen teens somewhere. So, you
Well,
can.
we appreciate you doing this for us tonight, Jackie. I know, um, it was can you please? Because another incident had happened. And my understanding is that the surgery went well,
Yes.
and they're going home tomorrow. So
Yes.
that's good news. So yeah, we're looking forward to next week,
Yeah.
and appreciate you doing this tonight. Have a good night. I'm going
Yeah.
to sign off, and I'm going to let you wrap this up for us.
All right. And I'm going to put it on loop, and then we'll get together later on that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Good night.
Y'all have a good night.
All right. See ya. Okay.